Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to do something a little more goofy and lighthearted. My last couple of videos have been about the watch market, inflation, pricing, and, well, I think those are very interesting conversations to have. They are not always the most uplifting, shall we say. So here I want to do something a little bit interesting. As those who have seen a number of my videos or some of the live streams I've done know that I am also into pinball. That's actually the hobby I'm in deeper than into watches. And there have been rumors for years now that the upcoming pinball machine from Jersey Jack Pinball is going to be Toy Story. So I've had Toy Story on the mind because there's a lot of reports that it's got to come out this year, finally. The pinball machine just got to come out. So I started thinking back to the cartoon, and I only ever saw the first one, the 1995 Pixar film. And I thought, well, in the world of watches, though, what would the characters in Toy Story wear? In particular, the toys. I'm not really concerned with the human characters there. So I've taken 8 of them and I've assigned them watches. Now, I'm going to go ahead and walk through those, and apologies up front for my terrible Photoshop skills, but I did what I had the capabilities to do. But I also need to note that I've only seen the first Toy Story. I haven't seen all 4 of them, and I know some of these characters have evolved in terms of their personality. And I tried to choose watches that fit with their personality as well as what they are as toys. But some of you who know these movies better might have better thoughts than I do. So comment below regarding what watches you think should be assigned to the characters. But the 8 we're going to do are Woody, Buzz Lightyear, Mr. Potato Head, Slink, Rex, Hamm, Beau Peep, and Sarge. So let's go ahead and start with the main character, which is Woody, the cowboy character. And for Woody, I've gone with the most vintage watch of the list of 8 I've compiled, and that is the Gene Autry animated 6-shooter watch. Now, Gene Autry, known as the Singing Cowboy, was very, very famous for his time. Gene Autry very much predates Toy Story, but in a way, I think Woody predates Toy Story. He's very anachronistic, in my opinion. I think back to my own childhood, which predates Pixar's Toy Story, and I grew up, those formative years would have been in the 80s for me, and I don't think I had a single cowboy toy. So for me, when I saw Toy Story, I thought, this is kind of interesting and odd. I don't think kids normally grow up with cowboy toys anymore, but I mean, maybe I was an exception. The Gene Autry watch, though, is very interesting, this one in particular from New Haven, and that is where the seconds feature would normally be a seconds hand. They actually went with an animated 6-shooter, so the revolver kind of ticks up and down and up and down. This was back in a time when that wouldn't have been nearly as controversial as it probably would be today, but it just added to the cowboy aesthetic. And there were Gene Autry watches that didn't have that animated feature, but I think the animated one is very, very popular amongst aficionados. I know these watches can go for quite a bit if they're working on the secondary market. I've actually handled a couple of them myself, but none fully working. They've all had problems, and it's just difficult to source parts for them because that mechanical 6-shooter component is not standard versus, I mean, think about anything else. Normally, it's a second hand that would go around, and if you're not doing that, it's a very specific sort of feature, even though the movement in and of itself is not an expensive movement that these watches rely on. So for Woody, I really leaned into the cowboy aesthetic, the fact that he is a cowboy, and so I went with a very famous real-life actor who was known for his cowboy roles. So let's move on to the source of conflict in Toy Story, and that is Buzz Lightyear. So Buzz Lightyear gets introduced. He has a lot of conflict with Woody. He's a spaceman, for lack of a better word, sort of an astronaut type. So I think most of you are probably thinking, oh, well, we got to go with Omega Speedmaster, right? We got to go with the watch that went to the moon. Not for me. I went ahead and I went with the Mission to the Moon MoonSwatch. So this is that new Swatch watch that is the most like the Omega Speedmaster's Moonwatch. And the reason I went with the MoonSwatch was for a couple of reasons. One, I thought, well, since Buzz is a toy, it would make sense to have a more toy-like version of the Moonwatch, and the Moonwatch is a very expensive luxury watch. Granted, this is all for fun, so I could do whatever I want, but that was the other aspect, was Buzz Lightyear in the movie, and it's been a long time since I've seen it, but from what I remember of him, he's totally deluded. He really thinks he's a spaceman despite being a toy, and to me, it just fits his personality so well. Like, he would actually think that the MoonSwatch is the Omega Moonwatch, the Speedmaster. He'd think it was real. And everyone else would be like, no, you're wearing a Swatch. But Buzz wouldn't get it. Buzz would think, no, I've got the Omega. And no, he wouldn't. He'd have a MoonSwatch because he's a toy. So that's why I decided that the MoonSwatch was the perfect watch to give to Buzz Lightyear. So let's start doing the other supporting cast members now. And I want to go ahead and start with Mr. Potato Head. Now, Mr. Potato Head is sort of a cynic, and he gets to play the villain in a lot of the games that the boy in the movie has him acting out. But because he's so cynical, he comes across as sarcastic, he can be rude, and so he's a bit of a potato grump. So given this, what I've decided to do is, because he's so often cast as the villain in the play scenarios that he's forced to partake in, I've given him the 12/82/38 day date from Rolex. So I've given him a yellow gold day date watch. And for me, it's just like, okay, Mr. Potato Head needs to embrace his inner villain. He needs to embrace the antagonistic role. And so if he's going to be this sort of sarcastic cynic, and he's going to be this kind of villainous style, I kind of turned him into a mafioso type and be like, all right, well, what would I'm thinking like Sopranos. So what's he thinking he's going to want to wear? And well, he's going to want to wear a Rolex, right? Well, it needs to be a flashy Rolex. It needs to be a gold Rolex, a yellow gold. You need to see this wealth from a mile away. And hey, he needs to get paid for all of that villain work he's forced to partake in. So that's what I've decided to go ahead and do for Mr. Potato Head. Next up is Slink, or I guess more accurately, Slinky Dog, sometimes called Slinky. This was a little trickier for me at first because I thought, do I even want to do this character? Because it's a dog, right? Well, I mean, it has a lot of dog-like qualities. Slink is nice. He likes to play. He barks. He growls. He wants pets. But he is capable of speech. And so because of that, I was like, okay, well, no, we need to treat him more like we are treating all these other toys. So I went ahead and went with the Marlin Automatic X Peanuts featuring Snoopy Beagle Scout. That's a Timex watch. And all right, so obviously Snoopy being on the watch is fundamentally why I've given this one to Slink. But there are a lot of Snoopy watches out there. Again, I could have gone all the way up to Omega for Slink if I wanted to. But because he's kind of a dog toy, I figured, okay, you're not going to give him an Omega, right? You're going to give him a lower cost watch. However, Slink is not a young looking toy. He looks like an older dog. And so because of that, I thought, okay, well, Slink's going to want a mechanical watch. So let's still do that. But Slink's also not going to be particularly fussy. So Timex, an older brand that Slink would know, but he's still, he's not embraced that quartz stuff. He's, he wants to stay mechanical. So that's kind of why I gave him this particular variant of the Marlin, which runs significantly more than most of the Timex watches do because of its automatic nature. All right, so next up is Rex, and Rex is a dinosaur. He's a Tyrannosaurus. Now, in terms of personality, Rex actually is a very anxious toy, suffers from anxiety. He's very, very fearful, but he also is extremely gullible and has a great deal of innocence. He's probably, at least as best as I can remember, the most childlike of all of the characters in Toy Story. And so rather than trying to figure out something that kind of fit with his anxious, fearful side, which I'm not even sure we could achieve with a watch, I wanted to play up the childlike demeanor of Rex and the fact that, he does like being a dinosaur. So the watch I've chosen for him is the Dinosauritos, which is a Flak watch. Now, Flak is, if you're not familiar, it's under the Swatch group. They make watches designed for kids. So kind of think Swatch, but really oriented to a young audience. And so this watch in particular, I just thought was fitting. It's colorful. It's a smaller watch because it's a child's watch, which would be good for the tiny little T-Rex arms that Rex has got. And the strap even has some dinosaurs on it. So again, it plays up the fact that Rex likes the fact that he's a dinosaur. So Dinosauritos. Who knew? Now moving from Rex to another animal, let's do Hamm. So Hamm is a piggy bank. He's a bit of a jokester. He's a wisecracker, but he's also the toy that seems most familiar with tech. And while I've not seen Toy Story 2, I read that Hamm was a bit of a channel surfer in that film. So what I've decided to do is run with the wrist remote controller from Casio. While the Woody's Gene Autry watch is my most vintage, this is, I think, the only other watch I have on the list that is out of production. I mean, I'm assuming it's out of production. I can't imagine what demand there is for a wrist remote controller watch anymore. But who knows? Casio's ongoing build library is massive, and I didn't sort through it to see if it was still in production. Just places I saw still had it listed said it was out of stock. So I'm assuming no. But hey, it's digital. The kind of that technological side of Hamm is embraced with that. The fact that it will allow him to even channel surf from his watch, I think adds a little bit of cachet to the thing. Even though I'm focusing really on Toy Story 1, let's throw that element in. It's a side character. I need help here. And so that's the sort of the angle I thought would make sense for him. So for our penultimate character, let's do Beau Peep. Now, my understanding is she got a lot more development later on. I think maybe in the fourth film, but she's in the first film, and she's not particularly well developed there. She comes across as very level-headed, and she's really romantic. And so she feels strongly about Woody, but she also has an attraction to Buzz Lightyear. And so I tried to think of something that could capture both her romantic side, but also being a level-headed choice. And I probably didn't do the best job here, but I went with the Tank Must by Cartier. This is actually the reference WSTA0042. This is a quartz version small tank. And so my logic here was obviously Cartier, very famous jewelry brand. The tank, its most famous watch, small size and quartz, speaks to Beau Peep's practicality, her level-headedness, going, okay, she has a strong I could see her saying, I have a strong attraction to the Cartier brand. I really love what the tank has symbolized over the many decades that it's existed, but let's not get out of control here and buy an automatic piece that is many, many thousands of dollars. To be fair, this is still like a few $1,000s. So she ain't cheap. She's got some taste, but she's tried to rein it in and keep things on the level while still playing to that romantic sort of wistful side of her personality. And the final toy I decided to go ahead and do is Sarge, or also known as Army Sarge or Sergeant, very minor character in the Toy Story film, but he's sort of the commander of an army of plastic toy soldiers because he himself is a plastic toy soldier. I had bags of these as a kid myself. So anyway, for him, I just really went straight forward with the official U.S. Army mechanical field watch, the 34mm variant from Marathon. And the reason is because Sarge considers himself a soldier, a U.S. Army soldier, he would find the U.S. Army branding on the watch very appealing to what it represents. It represents the military, specifically the U.S. Army, which even though he's a toy, he feels very attached to, but he'd want it to be a practical, real world kind of functional piece. And so something compliant with the actual mil spec that you would go with, which is what Marathon is known for producing, would also appeal to his personality. So those are the 8 characters I chose to do. As a quick recap, Woody, I gave the Gene Autry animated 6-shooter watch from New Haven. Buzz Lightyear, I gave the Mission to the Moon MoonSwatch from Swatch. Mr. Potato Head, I gave a Day Date from Rolex. Slink, I gave the Marlin Automatic X Peanuts featuring Snoopy Beagle Scout from Timex. Rex, I gave the Dinosauritos from Flak. Hamm, I gave the wrist remote controller from Casio. Beau Peep, I gave a Cartier Tank Must, a small version that is a quartz variant. And for Sarge, I gave Marathon's official U.S. Army mechanical field watch in 34mm. Again, I'm not super familiar with this franchise as a whole. What are your guys' thoughts? Other watch choices you would have made? Are there other characters possibly from this first film? Or maybe you have some thoughts from some of the later films that you think should be noted, and what watch would you give them? And that's pretty much it. I don't know if I'm going to do more Toon timepieces or not. This might be a recurring series. It's pretty goofy, so, I normally do things a little more even keel than this, but I just felt like doing something fun and not having to pull a bunch of graphs together. So anyway, I just thought it would be an interesting thought experiment, so to speak. But if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and there's a subscribe button floating around there somewhere if you want to subscribe. And otherwise, I hope you all have a really good day.